no one wants to read sponsored content if the story is, we have a sale. That's not a story, that's an advertising message. And people will notice that immediately and check out. People want to read when there's real content, right? Mm-hmm.
You're listening to Build Up, a ZGM podcast. I'm Selena.
And I'm Jordan. And we're here to shake up the world of home builder marketing.
Jordan, we have a highly anticipated show today.
That's exciting.
Yeah, we have Sara Kerr. She's the Associate Media Director here at ZGM, and she's here to talk about media and brand.
Ooh, I love it.
Exciting. Let's go.
Let's go.
Sara, welcome back.
Thank you.
The Sara series.
Excellent. Yeah. Building that up.
Absolutely. Well, realistically, your episode, I think, has been our most popular episode. So we're like, hey, if we're gonna, be talking media again, let's get the most popular media person from the show.
Yeah. Give the people what they want.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's what I always say.
So obviously this season, we're talking all about brand. And so we wanted to bring you back on the show to specifically talk about brand. Like, what is the relationship between brand and media, and how does it fit, and how does it fit with the home builder world? And so that's going to be our conversation today.
Love it. Love to talk branding. Mm-hmm. Very important conversation.
Excellent. I want to kick off with the kind of setting the stage for everyone around sort of like high purchase, high value, high research products versus kind of low value impulse purchase products,
right?
And the role that plays with, your advertising and specifically brand advertising.
Mm-hmm. Well, the importance of branding, of course, is even more so when you're talking a high research, high level purchase category. That's a lot more pressure on a decision for an individual.
Yeah, so, such as housing, especially. And with that, they've got a lot of similar purchases to look at. So that is why the branding would make a home builder, say, stand out so much more, is because people are evaluating very similar things, very similar price points. And at the end of the day, they're going to have to make a decision. And as people, we're very emotional creatures. We do like to go with our gut. So with that, having a feel for a brand can help push someone through on that decision. Just being familiar with something inherently just builds trust in someone's mind. So if you've been exposed to a brand a lot over the years, they've kind of planted the seed, as I think I said last episode, and lets that kind of grow and nurture in the brain and builds a place of trust where people would consider that brand ahead of others because they know it and they feel it's trustworthy just because they've been exposed to it so much.
Which is so important in the home buying journey because it's not a short purchase journey. It's a long purchase journey. It's not an impulse buy. And so that level of familiarity and trust plays so much more of an important role.
Exactly. It's much more helpful than, say, when you're online shopping for a cheap purchase and you can just rely on some reviews to spend $100 in the moment. This is not several hundreds of thousands of dollars. So no sweat, right, to follow through on something like that you're not familiar with.
Yeah. Jordan, you were saying like takes a minute, right? It's not like that instant, like it takes a moment to build up being familiar with a brand. And that's like a big thing I think we run into with a lot of clients we work with is like they wait until there's like a really like urgent situation. They have to move inventory and then they just want to push out ads. But like people typically takes them a moment versus like they see the ad and they buy right away. Like, we were just talking about like yoga pants, it's a little bit more impulsive buy. But for a home, you need to get to know who you are, especially as a builder. So I wanted to ask you, Sara, what are some spaces that you think are like great to do that, to like tell the story of being a great home builder and who you are?
Well, as you know, I'm a huge fan of using television, broadcast and digital. It's just an excellent place to build a brand because it has that high reach. When you're on broadcast TV, that has a huge halo effect because you're in a very premium placement. Consumers are very aware that not just anyone can throw an ad on TV.
So they know that this is a trustworthy brand just from being able to play in that space. And for your subsequent reach across a wider audience, you need to have that video also playing in the digital spaces because people are very divided in their time still between broadcasts, between YouTube videos, between watching streaming content and getting video content there. So I would never just buy TV. Like I'll always back that up with the digital placements to get that true reach. But video creative and just an excellent way to storytell because you got your audio video combo. Nothing quite like it. So that gives a lot of creative space. That gives a lot of space to have compelling storytelling, a lot of space to elicit emotion. And as I said, we're emotional creatures. So in our gut decision making, we will remember the way a brand makes us feel better than any kind of tagline or, any other little thing.
It's such a good point. Television is such a storytelling medium, and the opportunity to get emotional is impactful. And
Definitely.
It's really impactful even in this category, which I know a lot of builders and a lot of people think that it is you just buy based on the house and the features and the price and whatever, but people buy emotionally.
They
Like
do.
the number of times people walk into a show home and are like, this is the one, I love it, I can feel it. Like people buy emotionally. You can't get over it. That's how the brain works.
Yeah.
TV is so good for that.
It does. It still gets really high reach. It's just that the time spent has become significantly lower because we have a lot more places to watch.
Yeah. And I love that you talked about the different places that, could count as like TV, like not traditional TV. And I know you do a lot of work with like looking at where a specific audience is, and that kind of determines as well.
Certainly.
So if you're, depending on who's buying your product or who's buying your home, you make the decision based on where they're probably going to be looking, if they're going to be on regular TV versus, more like YouTube. But that's fantastic. Something that I typically have a lot of conversations with clients is when they're thinking about like brand advertising, they're like, it's just like, we don't need to talk about brand. We need just to show price and, and that's it. But,
product.
yeah.
I mean, you do need to do those things also, for sure.
What do you think is a good maybe breakdown of how much brand advertising should you be doing versus product focus?
Oh, that's a really tough question. Oh, and it's got to be based on like your total budget. But the idea of the brand work is that it's overarching and always running, whereas with your like product and sales messaging, that's something that's being switched around depending on seasonality, availability, desirability, promotions. So that's something that works in tandem. I would like to say at least split it up 50-50 at the minimum, but I mean, that really just depends on your budget level. If you have a lower budget level, you might just have like a bit of opportunity to say like online video only to try and get your brand feel across. And then you're focusing a lot on showing the product to differentiate at the lower part of the funnel because that's just where you're at budget wise. So the split might be like 30% brand, 70% product focus, sales message, whatnot. But if you have a lot to spend, that might lean more towards, spending heavy on TV and out of home. And that's taking up like 50% of your budget. But within that space, perhaps you're using brand ads, but maybe with some of the out of home, you're still calling out like products in the area you've placed the out of home in. And then with the digital, you're doing additional legwork with having the extra reach for the video, and then also showing off your product with a lot of different imagery so people can get a feel for like what the inside of the home is like and really imagine themselves there. And then of course, just being able to have touch points all over that digital space for people to kind of pick up on the brand when they're ready and follow through to, looking at the site, exploring more, maybe looking at what's available in terms of quick possessions or getting in contact with a sales rep.
Yeah. So it's tailored. It's
definitely tailored. And that's so funny. I was recently just at a webinar where almost every response was, well, that needs to be tailored to the situation. But that is so true with advertising. Just every situation is unique with budget and objectives, what you might have available creatively. So it is all very tailored.
Yeah, I love that it's always tailored, and it should be always tailored, especially when, we have some clients and we've worked with people who their builder brand like has no awareness in the market because we have the luxury of doing some research, which is great. So in that situation, it's like we need to do maybe a little bit more that brand
Yeah.
focused storytelling
Mhm.
ads and being in, spaces where we're going to be able to reach a lot of people and tell a story.
Yeah.
Versus, sometimes a brand has been around for a really long time and there's already some awareness in the market. So we could maybe do a little bit more pulled back version.
Yeah. Yeah, and especially if you're entering a new market.
That's the big one.
Mhm.
Like if you're entering a brand new market, like Sarah, you tell me, but like, are you over investing in brand?
Ooh. Wow, that tailored experience. It would be optimal if you had the budget to go in with branding when you're entering a new market, but that's usually not the case. A lot of the time, especially with a builder, their first build in a new city is exploratory and they don't have a lot of funds to put towards it. So you might have to kind of tailor that branding to like a very specific quadrant sometimes. Definitely have to tailor it a lot to digital. Something nice and grassroots in that situation could be like getting your brand ads in at the local rec center to kind of hit with families if that's the kind of build you've got going. Or if maybe it's a true starter home, you can lean in pretty digitally and try to target a bit younger demographic and go, a bit heavier on like YouTube and social to try and get that brand building generated. I do think social platforms are very strong for awareness as well. A lot of platforms are used almost daily. It is definitely hitting the eyeballs when it's in a feed, right? You have to scroll past it. And if it catches your interest, then it catches your interest, but a lot harder to ignore than a traditional display ad, which I obviously do find a lot of value in as well to get that wider internet reach because people aren't only on social. And in fact, they're using social less than they had in the past. We really peaked with social use during the pandemic. And I noticed a bit of a decline in how much reach Facebook, Instagram get on a weekly basis overall. It used to be very high, like over 70% of adults 18 plus would be on Facebook within a week. But now that's even dropping below 50.
Wow.
Yes, so
Drop.
quite a big difference. I think people maybe got a little bit sick of spending so much time on social. It is widely talked about how this can be a toxic environment for people and emotionally draining, physically draining to just be on a screen that long. So I think there's a lot more effort from people to remove themselves from these spaces.
I love your note about like grassroots and kind of looking at opportunities of advertising in more community focused spaces. I also wanted to ask you about content, like sponsored content and maybe some like niche publications and like where or when is it best to be in those kind of placements?
I'd say when you have a story to tell, no one wants to read sponsored content if it's the story is we have a sale. That's not a story, that's an advertising message. And people will notice that immediately. When you have a story to tell, people want to read when there's real content, sponsored content. So if you've got the story is we have a sale, come in with just a story about the market, advertising message. Real estate market's been very people top of mind will notice that immediately and check out fluctuations. People want to read when there's real content, right? There's a lot of different stories you can tell that people are interested in that space. So if you come in from like more of an expertise angle, then it's really just showing that your brand is knowledgeable, can service clients with a degree of integrity while they're aware of like problems in the market or nuances. So I think that alone is like a much more valuable way to use sponsored content. And I do like sponsored content. I use it semi-frequently. The great part about digital sponsored content is you can target the user that you want to direct to the content. So in that way, it's pretty mid funnel. If it's you looking for users who were already reading real estate content, say, and then directing them via social or ads on network to read other like content, that's not so hard and you're hitting your right audience.
Yeah, I love reading content.
I know you do.
Yeah, I also and I just love the sponsored content as a channel.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's
I do too.
such a quality one.
Strong.
So we talked about television, we talked about sponsored content. What are some of those other really effective, really strong brand channels?
Definitely social, which I did touch on. People, like I said, are still on social quite a lot. It's good to diversify those channels. Facebook is a bit aging out. Instagram does pretty well with younger audiences. But I think if you have the budget availability, it's great to be very robust with that social channel mix. People are different, right? We're all different people. We all like different things. So I hate to generalize things into like demographics.
although it does happen a lot because that's the way research is conducted. But I think it's great if you have the funds to invest in the budding channels, say like TikTok, for example, pretty hot topic. I think it's a great investment channel in general for like Canadians. It's about 10% of people that are using TikTok regularly. It's not super high, but if you focus to like a younger demographic below 30, it's more like 35% of people are using. So obviously they're not going to then migrate off TikTok that they're used to and go to other social platforms. Although I can say we don't know like what kind of social platforms we'll have in future. You can bet that Facebook's going to age out. TikTok's going to be your main buyer at some point. So if you can afford it, like get in front of people now, develop that organic channel presence, get people familiar with the brand before they're in that buying stage.
TikTok. I know I have a lot of discussions with clients about, it's hard to manage a lot of social channels. It's expensive. So it's like, when do we start doing it? And I know a lot of builders are like, soon.
That is the barrier. You have to have someone to manage that social channel. It has to be active. So there is a lot of legwork to add that in. And because it's video focused, that's a lot more effort than, finding photos you already have from like all your show homes and stuff and like doing nice little posts. You have to really make content. And it has to be interesting.
And like authentic and like real. That TikTok video is different from an Instagram video. Like an Instagram reel, it's almost like it could be like more polished, but sometimes that more polished look on TikTok is like, man, I don't know. I don't know if that's authentic for that audience.
I feel like an authentic way, and potentially a cheaper way, through TikTok, is using influencers, partnering and sponsoring and doing other things. Like you then get them to create the content, they post the content, you collab with them, it's their authentic voice and vision, hits their audience, maybe not as widespread, but if you find the right influencer with the right audience, then it might hit right.
And that can require a bit of budget, unfortunately, to work with like a big enough pool of influencers to move the needle. But I have seen influencers actually work really well for a more authentic way to build awareness and connect with people.
I want to ask you a bit about more like the traditional style. Maybe it's not traditional. I don't know why. Or maybe
I'm talking offline.
Let's
channel.
Call it offline. Thoughts about like newspaper, magazine,
out of home.
Out of home stuff.
I do really love out of home. Survey details do say that people are noticing out of home a lot less than they had in the past. Another very interesting stat that I'm just generalizing from doing a lot of BIVA data and numerous research a lot of the time, say the premium outdoor space, that billboard space, the biggest, most noticeable space, that used to capture, 80+% of people on a weekly basis, or they'd say they had noticed that in the past 7 days, they'd noticed, billboard creative. Now that is like closer to 35%. It's dropped shockingly low. And that made sense when they were doing surveys in the pandemic and people weren't leaving their houses. But now people are leaving their houses, and that really hasn't moved up very much, that people say they notice this.
I wonder if it's a change in commute though. Like if people aren't commuting to work, like if they're still work from home.
It's just quite surprising that hasn't built up. I certainly notice billboards a lot, but I'm extremely biased because I'm looking at ads.
You're also looking for ads
all the time.
Me too. I'm always looking at them.
So what's tough is like getting rid of our bias as advertisers sometimes and just going with the data, even if it doesn't resonate with the way you're living your life and noticing things. We have that data for a reason. But what I have noticed is indoor ads have come up a lot and people paying attention to them. They're still around billboard level, like 35% for like a strong reach of indoor ads in like retail spaces, malls, that kind of thing. But those used to be quite a bit lower, like 15%. So that's a huge amount of more attention to be paying to those. They are a bit more prominent now, and people maybe got more used to like going to these indoor spaces and being a bit less social in them when you're wearing a mask in like the pandemic and walking around shopping. But so that's been a surprising thing. So lately I've been comboing the indoor outdoor quite a bit more, whereas I would have definitely stuck more so to billboards in the past. The data is what it is.
Yeah, there was something we were working on recently, Sarah, and it was mall traffic. Maybe it's a specific mall, but mall traffic was like
it was
way up.
Way up. Yeah, it was up from before the pandemic.
Yeah.
People are really happy to be out and physically shopping again, so it seems.
Yeah. And those indoor placements, you've got mall options.
That's true. So that could affect it as well. Just people are really happy to be out of their house and go shopping. And so now they are noticing those retail location ads a lot more.
Experience, I
The
want
mall
to
experience.
Yeah.
Speaking of experience, another great way that we also talked about recently to connect with audiences is to do some kind of integration with an event or a sponsorship, get out in the community, be present. As we were kind of talking about, maybe go to the local festival and have a tent and make it more experiential for people to remember your brand. Like serve drinks, have a comfy space or something. Make it special.
Interactive, special.
Yeah.
Have like your team ambassadors or somebody there
Exactly.
to help tell the story
Yeah,
of who you are
talk
as a
about
company.
a good way to break into a new market.
Yeah.
Be at a local event, be present, have the brand known, but give something to the community that makes it memorable.
Yeah. I was recently having a conversation about trade shows, and there was like a time where like trade shows was almost like, I don't know, it kind of fell off a little bit, but I always like to think about niche trade shows, like obviously like something like a home and garden show or those kind of things where it's like, these are like people who are in the home buying world or renovation space already and taking advantage of those opportunities to be there and start telling your brand story, I think is something to consider.
It's interesting, this isn't going to be based on anything other than the conversation we're having right now. Maybe I'll do more research on this and write a blog on it later. But, the increase in mall traffic, the resurgence of trade show experiences, and just this whole idea of maybe coming out of the pandemic, people are looking for more experience, more like, we've been online, we've done so many online things that it's like, okay, now I want to like physically and like be in an experience.
Yeah, interact with other people, be social.
Yeah.
There's something to that.
Well, I also think, and Sarah, you already touched on this, but it's like digital ads, it's like almost anyone could put up a sponsored Facebook ad. Like it's a little more
It's accessible.
Thank you. I was going to say another thing, but yes, accessible and like a little easier, and the trust behind that is not,
very low. Yeah.
But like
in fact,
TV,
social placements have the lowest trust of all ad placements. People are very wary, knowing that anyone can throw up an ad on there. Is it legitimate? A lot of the threads you'll see on ads for products on Instagram, Facebook are people just asking like, is this legit?
Is it real?
From here? Yeah.
Am I going to
trust
get ripped
is low.
off? Yeah. That's why it's like when you think about like TV or like when you think about like a magazine ad, like this company has invested into this and it looks nice. It's like, or like an experience, like, okay, this company is like legit. So those kind of things I think are really important too. And about brand placement.
A real life touch point where that this brand is a real and legitimate thing.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
So we've talked about television, we've talked about out of home, we've talked about social, we've talked about experiences and sponsored content. What's on the horizon for media, Sarah? Like, is there anything new, innovative, creative, or like where are we going with brand advertising 2024 and beyond?
I wouldn't say there's anything brand new. What's kind of the buzzword these days is connected TV, but it's not new at all. It's just that since people have been indoors and watching more streaming, people have become much more aware of this as a placement and investing more heavily in it. What is new with it is a lot of companies are trying to figure out a good way to attribute connected TV, because it is kind of like I tell my clients, think of it as TV, but people are streaming it. So it's probably on their TV screen. They're watching perhaps a movie. They're not going to just stop and interrupt that experience, even if they can click and like navigate away from that to do something. So it's very upper funnel. There is a lot of work being done on, proving that it's moving some kind of needle via tracking. But otherwise, I'm a big fan of just different online formats. Usually they come at a bit higher CPM, but something like an expandable unit that might have like a lot of video and images, or things like having a quiz that's fun and engaging for people. And it doesn't take them away from their browsing experience, right? They can do it right on the page. It's a good way to make a memorable piece for a brand, because you don't often actually encounter these ads. So it does stand out a lot more in that digital space.
So Sarah, we've been talking about all the exciting kind of ways to talk about your brand and where to put your brand. But how long do you think it takes to build a brand presence? If somebody or a builder or really any company has really never done any storytelling, how long do you think it takes for impact to be made?
Well, that's going to depend on a budget. Once again, you really need to have that longevity with the message. It's not something you can achieve in like a 2-week or 1-month turnaround. The more time in market, the more time for familiarity. So really what you're doing with the branding is ideally it's always on. It's on for a really long flight. If you have like to flight your budget because that's your reality, then you got to try and go for like, I don't know, as long as you can in market with it, and then take a pause and make sure you're resuming it. The purpose of the branding is, threefold. It's like reaching your potential current buyers, it's planting the seed for your future buyers, and it's reinforcing that brand with people who've already purchased. So you're keeping top of mind for people who are literally shopping for you in the moment. You're sowing the seeds for people who might shop for you later, make it like an aspirational thing perhaps, to be able to purchase from that brand later. And don't ever forget about people who've already purchased with you, reinforcing a point of pride that they've made that purchase with like a home builder is huge, because then, they're seeing your ad and they're going, yeah, that's my home. And maybe they're telling their friend next to them, I purchased X home builder and I love my home. So there's nothing more powerful than word of mouth, of course. And then to have that really positive relationship with your previous buyers so that they're considering your brand for their next purchase. Like I've been talking about with my Toyota, I've got a point of pride that car has worked so well for me. Of course, I'm going to purchase a Toyota in the future. And that would be the same for a home. If you've already had a great experience with your home builder, you've loved your home, but maybe you want to, upsize or downsize, you won't have another home builder in mind. You'll want to be buying with that home builder again.
Yeah, I love it.
I've used the concept in the past of, brand advertising sort of like an airplane. And, it takes a lot to get off the ground and get to that like cruising altitude. And then once you're up there, it doesn't take that much to keep it up there. But then if you take your foot off the gas, it's going to slowly start to come back down. And then you got to do work a lot harder to get it back up.
That's true. There is realistic consequences for turning that brand tap off. It does take a longer time. I've read studies that it can take like a full year, maybe even more sometimes, depending on how much awareness you already had in the market. But eventually it does, unfortunately, hit the ground and you've been off too long, and it's going to be a lot harder to get people to complete the purchase, even if you've managed to get them in the funnel.
Right.
Because humans are forgetful creatures and we need to be reminded. And that's why huge brands and brands that have been around forever, well, not forever, but for a very long time, like Coke, like Pepsi, like these huge brands are always advertising.
They are in all different placements, including TV.
Yeah. Yeah. So the importance of strategic flighting of your media over the course of, the year and long term, make sure that plane doesn't come down too far. You're just kind of hovering it in a nice, strong, memorable zone.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I love that analogy.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah.
Guys.
Good conversation
Fabulous
again.
as always. I can't wait till next time. I'll book you in from now. Okay.
It's also great getting to talk to Sarah. She's so knowledgeable in the world of media, and the conversation about media and brand and how you connect media and brand and the importance of brand in media and this kind of product is, I thought it was a great conversation.
It's always so fun, first of all, to talk to Sarah.
Yeah.
She's wicked. She is an expert, and we're so lucky to have her.
Yes.
And I foresee us having her again and again and again on the show.
Absolutely. So, takeaways from this episode. What did you think?
There was a lot of really great things in this episode, but for me, the biggest thing was Sarah's notes about being in trusted placements.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, digital is fantastic, and it has a really important job when you think about media planning and campaigns and all that great stuff. But when you're thinking about brand, being in placements that are seen as higher value, like TV, like print, my favorite, to really tell a story and create that feeling of, oh, wow, like this brand is investing and spending a lot of money to be in these placements, and like I should pay attention to them.
Yeah, they're a big deal.
Exactly.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Like, you want to make the biggest purchase of your life with someone who you trust, who you feel like has, is a big deal and has a reputation, and buying on social, like I could do it tomorrow myself.
It's easy, and people know that the consumer and like right now, like the market, like the average person understands it's not that expensive to boost a social post, but to be in a magazine, to be on TV, and like some
even
other
radio.
things, radio, out of home, those kind of things is a bigger investment. And like you're serious as a brand.
Absolutely. Yeah, good takeaway. My takeaway, I'm going to take us all the way back to the beginning of our conversation with Sara. We talked about this being such a high researched product, which makes a ton of sense. This is the biggest purchase ever. You're not just going to like walk in and buy something. But I think the connection there was the fact that this is also an emotional purchase. Mm-hmm. Like we know that. We know that this is a high research purchase and it's a very expensive purchase. And at the same time, though, we also know that this is where you're going to be living your life and having your family memories. And it's still an emotional purchase at the end of the day. We still make those purchases using our guts. And having emotionally connecting brand advertising is just such a strong way to help with that emotional decision.
Yeah, and break through the noise of like all the other brands, because it's a competitive space.
It's such a competitive space. And when you look at it in most markets that we look at across North America, most builders are just, we've got this product in this community at this many hundreds of thousands of dollars. Mm-hmm. Like that isn't inspiring anyone. Like you've got to then be like, you've got to have that person at just the right moment who's like, okay, ready to purchase. That price sounds great. That's the community, exciting. Mm-hmm. That's so like hard to come by and so rare. Like you're just kind of throwing your shotgun money out into the wind. Like it isn't really doing much. But if you spend more of that money on the emotive brand connecting advertising with people and then follow up with, those targeted, retargeted audiences on your product, that's when the magic starts to happen.
And then you're not just competing on price.
Yeah, which nobody wants to be competing on price.
No,
we don't want to do this drive to the bottom. We want to get great prices and great margins and do it in a way that customers feel excited and warm and welcome and
memorable.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I love it. That was a good one, Jordan.
Thank you.
Okay.
See you next time.
Bye.
This has been Build Up, a ZGM podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and subscribe on your favorite listening app. Thanks to Shelby, our editor and producer, Scott for our original music, and you for listening along. Be sure to follow us on your favorite social platform at Build Up Podcast.